tuning in and listening. I think we're just going to take a 1 to 2 sentence introduction, if we could, of everybody. So I'm going to do it from how I see on the screen. So first off, if we could start with Tracy, just give us 1 or 2 sentences about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name is Tracy Jenkins. I am the co-artistic and executive director of Lula Music and Arts Center at Lula Lounge in Toronto. I'm also on the Toronto Music Advisory Council and a board member of the Canadian Live Music Association. I run a festival and a small record label.
Great, thank you. Max, over to you.
Hey everyone, I'm Max Merrifield. I'm the outgoing executive but still artistic director of the Northern Lights Festival Boreal in Sudbury. I'm also a board member of Folk Music Ontario. I'm an artist and numerous other things, but really happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Erin?
Good afternoon, pleasure to be here. Thanks for asking me to sit on this panel. My name is Erin Benjamin. I'm the president and CEO of the Canadian Live Music Association. I sit on a variety of boards and advisory committees in the music industry and business space, and I am formerly an executive director of Folk Music Ontario many, many, many lifetimes ago.
And Jennifer.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Jennifer Goheen. I'm the producer at the Havelock Country Jamboree, but I'm also here because I was asked by the CMAO, Country Music Association of Ontario, to sit on this panel and just give some feedback on the event we ran this year. So I'm a director on that board as well.
Great. And I'm Heather Gibson. I am the executive producer of Popular Music and Variety at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa, which means that I'm responsible for programming all of music except orchestra. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about venues and live performance and the road back and recovery. But I thought I'd start a little bit, we had a tiny little bit of preamble before we came on, start a little bit about if anybody currently is presenting or has, and I know Jennifer, you mentioned that you have done a little bit. Did you want to talk about that and if it's a model for the future, or is it just something you did as a stopgap?
The Canadian Music Association of Ontario was very successful in running the first ever drive-in awards show on October the 4th. So we had post-dated our event that usually happens the end of May to October. We waited until we were sure we couldn't run normal programming and switched into a drive-in event. We are non-for-profit, so as far as profitability of an event like that, I don't see in my other role at the Havelock Jamboree that being a goal, but for the awards show, it was a very good alternative for us in these times. It went over quite well.
And Tracy, you said have you been largely dormant since March?
Yeah, in terms of live presentations, we haven't been able to do anything, but we have tried a couple of live streams initially, from artists' homes, and then a couple from Lula Lounge that were actually real live streams. And then the last ones we've been doing have been more pre-recorded streams that are then, broadcast as live streams. But we haven't done any live events with audience. Working, with our BIA, we had talked about trying to do some things in the neighborhood over the fall, but even that is proved to be just too complicated in terms of not wanting to encourage people to gather. So yeah, we are basically hibernating except for these live streaming events.
Right. And so to go off of the live streaming a little bit with Jennifer and Max with festivals, are you seeing that as a factor at all in what you're doing, or is your planning really going to get back to live in person? Is that the goal for 2021?
Well, I would say the goal for us is definitely to get back to live. That's what we do. We have done a few live streams, and we did a drive-in, and we did some patio programming. But really my I've been way more passionate through it about trying to present live music, even if it is dribs and drabs or like small audiences rather than live streams. But the question for me is like, how, yeah, we want to get back there, but how soon can we? So what can we do in the meantime?
Mm-hmm. Jennifer?
Same with us. With the CMAOs, we're doing a Plan A and Plan B for the end of May. If we're able to bring back all of our programming and run as normal, great. I still see something being modified, and we would go to Plan B, which again would be a drive-in type event. As far as the Jamboree, we're a large outdoor 4-day camping festival that sees 20,000 people. I just have not successfully been able to find a way to stream and change that. It just takes what that event's been about for 30 years. So we are planning a show, even if it has to be at half capacity with restrictions and certain measures, and hoping for the best.
Well, I think that brings me to sort of one of the things that I feel is an interesting point right now. This is maybe, Aaron, you might have some comments about this, is really wanting to get from you guys, what does coming back look like? And I don't mean, I'm not asking you, so this is what it looks, but when do you say, you know what, we have enough capacity, we have enough regulation that we can work with? What does that look like for you? Is it a capacity thing? Is it a social distance thing? Or does it have to be 100% of what it was in order for you guys to say, okay, we can go again?
Well, I'll defer to the practitioners on the call in terms of what their vision is. And, I've tried to resist the daily request to speculate on what our future looks like. I cannot see, even with the vaccine, a return to what we knew, simply because of the length of time we're talking about and inoculating everybody and the unknowns of all of that. I believe that at this point, anyway, and I reserve the right to change my mind and all the things that we will not be back to normal, and that's not necessarily a desirable state anyway for a lot of experiences. So there could be some really good outcomes of this in terms of whether it's application of various kinds of protocol, just fewer people in general, do multiple shows like we saw the Brett Kissel drive-in outside of Ottawa, did 3 shows in one day kind of thing. I'm not sure that we'll go back to the shoulder to shoulder sort of crushing the front of the stage thing in the short term post vaccine.
I think that's what I wanted to drill into a little bit, Aaron, is not so much speculating on the when, but more on the model. And so if the 3 of you are looking, particularly when you say the practitioners, if you're looking at a new model or potentially that, when do you think you can pull the plug and go, you know what, we can work with that? Is it, I know Aaron and the CLMA have been talking about maybe percentage-based, trying to get government to move into a percentage-based regulation. Is it a, or I guess what I'm asking is, in your organizations, the way they're structured, or your venues, do you feel you need to be back at 100% capacity, in order to make this work? Like, are there where's your first step? Where are you going to be able to say, we can give this a shot now? Jennifer?
We've looked at a couple of plans for the large show, for the Jamboree. We are quite comfortable if we have to run at 50% capacity and offering both a safe place, because everyone's in campsites that are socially distanced. We may be able to provide a feed to their site, as well as some socially distant spots on the field for people to come towards the stage. So we've looked at a bunch of different plans, and that's all really we can do. And we're quite comfortable coming in, like I said, at the 50% if we have to, and making things safe for everybody. But it will come back to the vaccine, and the award show is completely different. Everything's done indoors, so stuff for CMAOs may have to change where a bunch of it does go. The learning stuff and the some of the events go to a stream as well, and then we do a drive-in show, because that is May. We're talking quite short time from now, really.
And Tracy, what about you with a fixed venue? How are you looking at the world?
Well, it seems, let's see, we'll probably be able to open even without the full capacity that we had before, but it's certainly going to have to be more than something like 30% for it to work. Um, like at least 50%, and that would only be for some shows. So I can see us being able to open in some way with a reduced capacity, but it's just going to be very, very different from what it was before. I mean, part of what we're thinking about is how do we keep the artists and the staff safe, and there's just no way that we're going to be able to present 12 and 15 piece salsa bands on that little Lula stage for a long time. And since that's the core of what we've, has allowed us to survive over the last couple of decades, it's a pretty radical shift is going to be needed in our whole presenting model. So we'll probably be looking at smaller bands, which is likely going to mean kind of a shift in the genres that we're presenting. So I don't know, we're really struggling to figure out what it might look like, and just trying to, I guess, remain nimble and flexible in our thinking, and not get too wound up about what, when it's going to happen, and just maintain the connections that we have with artists and agents and other presenters. And where we can do things to try to make sure that some money is still flowing to artists and agents, so that infrastructure doesn't disappear in this waiting period.
Mm-hmm. And so you bring up money, which is something that I've not been on the right calls to have conversations about money. Do you foresee that the model of if you're only able to operate at a 30 or 50% capacity, do you think that the artists and the agents should also be having a different expectation about fees and what we are able to do? Or do you think that there's a shift in how the whole funding model is going to happen? No one wants to answer that one. Max?
I can comment a little bit. I know as festival programmers, we're looking to this year and next year, and the degree of uncertainty, and I know some of us have made changes to the way we engage artists for the festivals, and that there are conversations ongoing with agents and agencies and bookers and artistic directors around some changes and tweaks to the traditional models of booking, for sure. It's definitely being talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. We're all part of the same ecology. If we want the ecology to work, we all have to do our part, and nobody wants to pay artists less. But if there's no money, if we're operating it, like, the math has to make sense. And I think that every partner along the way has to be able to, and I don't doubt that agents and artists will be there with us. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I mean, there's just not enough money, or we have to get through some sort of rebuild phase, which, I think many of us can't even imagine having, being where we are on the timeline of this thing. So there's no question it'll have to shift. And I would be really interested to know, like, what artists are, we don't have to get into this necessarily, but just anecdotally, part of my thinking is informed by what artists are making now and what the expectations are, and how those conversations are going today with things like live streams, and contracts, and how they're changing, because it just would be inconceivable to think that even those who survive would be able to be back up at 100% where they were. We're seeing even traditional granting programs, the Ontario Music Fund was cut in half. Celebrate has changed dramatically. The live music fund stream is being announced today at Ontario Creates with major changes. So even the policy frameworks that we were used to, pandemic or no pandemic, have shifted as well. So there's a lot at play, and there's simply no, anyone who's thinking that things will be normal in this regard are maybe not living on the same planet.
to put a punctuation on the end of that.
You know what? I have no more filters. So if anybody wants to know what I really think about anything, today's the day.
Well, and one of the things that I've been sort of pondering myself as I'm, sitting in isolation is also what we used to know as the headliner, and that the person that artist who required 100% capacity in order to really make anything work. And maybe this is, Jennifer, you of such a large festival. I don't know if you guys have been thinking about that, of whether the artist level of who a headliner is might change during this recovery period, and that we all can't afford that person or two people we used to have, and now it's that one price level down, if you will. I'm like Aaron. I've lost a few filters, but one down, that we may be looking at our headliners because that's what we can afford with this new reality. Is that factored for you?
Yeah, it's going to be for sure. And renegotiating terms of contracts, like has already been discussed, for a run at 50% capacity, there has to be a little room on negotiating fees and things like that. Now, we didn't postpone our event until late in the game last year, so we flipped our lineup to this year. So I don't have a lot of wiggle room for change there, which could be a factor when it comes into, are they going to allow us to run? Is it going to be 20%, 30%, 50%? So it's just really watching and seeing what happens. But yeah, there has to be some flexibility there. And like you said, some of the funding's not there. The big sponsors are not there. It's just, there's a lot of change. It's going to be a tough year for sure going in. And as you've said, until a vaccine comes out, I'm not seeing much change for 2021. I'm thinking we're looking more at 22, 23. So plans really do have to change for what we are doing if we're going to make it through this.
Mm-hmm. Max, you're not currently doing programming, are you, of some kind? I know that you had sent a note about that.
Nothing very formal at this point, at this time, but we also did carry over a lot of programming that was supposed to be presented last summer. So that's something we're dealing with. Yeah, I had another point to make, but I forgot, so you'll have to come back.
We'll circle back. I mean, one of the things I was going to add is that, so we have been doing programming, live audience programming, obviously not in the last couple of weeks in Ottawa. We're also doing live programming across the country, and one of the things that's been very interesting is the provincial regulations in every province we go into. And so it sounds like the three of you haven't really delved into what the hard, sort of the nuts of it become. And I was going to talk a little bit about artist expectation, but it sort of sounds like we're not there. Like, for instance, one of the regulations right now has to do with plexiglass. Plexiglass is extremely expensive. And so I wonder also too, if smaller clubs like Tracy's, if you're even going to be able to afford the regulation. So there's some interesting things there. But in Calgary, for instance, we did a show last weekend, and the AHS, who we negotiated with 2 or 3 times on this, the Alberta Health, I don't know what the S is, Alberta Health something, that they could either have a plexiglass cube built for them with a roof, which was about $3,000, like a sound booth, or the whole band would wear masks. So two very polar. And so what ended up happening was that on the live stream, because it was in-person audience and live stream, we had people commenting about what was with the masks, but the band was fully wearing PPE. Anyways, but it sounds like at this point you guys haven't really. Aaron, have you gotten very far into what artists might expect at this coming forth?
In terms of their experience playing a show?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just wanting to back up quickly, we did survey our members around the cost of plexiglass or PPE generally to kit out a show or a venue or a room or festival, whatever. It really ran the gamut from not expensive to stupid, like shockingly different from each other. But I would say that the majority of respondents were paying less than I would have anticipated for PPE, but it really does. Like for your example,
yeah, and I think that PPE has come down because of supply, but my understanding still is that plexiglass is just skyrocketing.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't surprise me. So just to your question about artists and their experience, I mean, I know from our members, I mean, obviously a chief priority is the constant consideration to keeping artists, crew, and fans safe, right? So what does that look like? When will artists be comfortable playing? I mean, I know there are artists who are comfortable playing, there are artists who will not play. There's a real range of opinion and feelings there. I think that, you know, I think I can only say that the live music industry is dedicated to ensuring that artists are as safe as possible. And what does that look like? And I couldn't speak to how our other panelists would be able to address that specifically in terms of what it looks like today. But what it looks like tomorrow, I think, is strict rigor around whatever protocols are required, and maybe a deeper conversation with managers and possibly agents and the artists themselves about what they need to feel safe. And that could be even things I always think about, like post show. Everyone's had a few drinks and they want to get close to the artist, and how will security change? What does the artist's personal space look like and beyond? But I guess all I can say is right now it's a priority, and people are thinking about it and talking to artists about what they will need.
Well, and currently, the provinces we're doing work in, there is no post show, and in fact, the audience and the artist never come together. So the artists, and this is kind of universal in all the provinces, is the artists are even entering indoors from other doors than the audience is. So and then the two never meet. And so there's no merch sales. So there's another area of revenue for both artist and sometimes venue. And obviously for record labels, that the merch sales are completely gone because you can't touch any of those things and you can't have staff selling them. So there's a number of those kind of rules, but maybe I'll leave that because it sounds like no one's really.
Sorry, I sort of misunderstood the question, and like we don't have anything currently in the works, but we have been programming through the pandemic. So we did some live stream stuff, and that was the Canada Day one was pretty much in the thick of it. So even for that, it was very carefully managed, like different entrances and exits and all of the whole schedule. It was filmed in advance, but we did a patio thing where we definitely needed barriers, impermeable barriers on patios. And there was definitely some confusion around that event. But most of all, like for the drive-in and for all those events, artists were very understanding, obviously, about the restrictions in place. But I did find too, it had to be a two-way. It had to address everyone. It was, we had to make artists aware of what they could and couldn't do and what their expectations were, as much as we had to sort of police the audience, even at the drive-in. So yeah, it was just, and we felt at that time for the drive-in that we had to have certain infrastructure in place to make it responsible, even if it wasn't like mandated by law, like separate trailers, for example, for the artists, and cleaning crews and stuff like that we just felt was responsible, which definitely added major expense to that event. So I don't know what other people, like the drive-in model and what other people's experiences are, but it's, it's definitely doesn't produce the same revenue to scale as like a festival. So there's challenges there for sure with that model.
So Aaron, what have you been hearing and conversations that you've been a part of towards not being stagnant in determining what these new rules and regulations will be? It feels a little bit like people are like, well, we don't know when we're going to open, and so we're going to deal with it when it looks like it's closer in sight. But I know your group's been doing a lot of those conversations. So how do you think in Ontario that we get to a point where there's like a playbook, a rule book? Is it going to take trying, like at the National Arts Center, that some of what we're doing is we're just trying, we're testing the rules and regulations? Or is there something going on that I obviously don't know about, where people are starting to have really in the weeds conversations about regulations?
Well, this is a long one, so I'll try and stay high level and Cole's notes here, but stop me if it's too much. But I mean, honestly, so the regulations in the province of Ontario are we're starting, and I offer all of this with the greatest deference to public health, and I want to state unequivocally that the Canadian Live Music Association and its members have been working in step with our minister, Lisa MacLeod, in the province of Ontario, and with public health, and have been doing our very best to understand and respect every single bit of regulation. When the regulations haven't made sense, we've requested, not pushed back, for change. Most recently, having received change in the face of the modified stage 2, which prohibited any activity inside venues, including live streaming. When we went back to government saying, this doesn't make sense because film and television can, if you're a Netflix shoot, you can come into my venue and you can shoot it. But I, as the venue, can't shoot a live stream. It makes no sense. They agreed. They managed to change the regulations. However, we're at a place now, and I think every day, and I don't know how my colleagues on this call or in the audience feel about this, but I want to choose my words carefully. I mean, the live music venues have been perhaps unfairly caught in a particular kind of net. When we look at the types of businesses that are allowed to open with greater numbers, from places, and this is cliche at this point, places of worship or schools, or even packing airplanes and all of the things. And there's a protocol that are applied in all of those, and those industries have worked those things out that make sense in a way that makes sense for public health, yet we have not. Even though we have zero, as far as I'm aware, zero cases of outbreaks or tracing back COVID cases back to live performance, etc. And so what we're attempting to do is very carefully and gingerly and in as delicate a way as we can manage, like help public health understand what it actually looks like inside a live music venue. And Tracy has been involved as a board member and as a stakeholder in the community in lots of these conversations. Just really helping them at this point, I think we need to untangle some of the regulations. We need to help government understand what we're doing to keep people safe and prove to them that live music is not some sort of, super spreader, especially with all of the regulations that really are in place around PPE, et cetera. But it's a huge, huge uphill battle because they're challenged because for whatever reason, and we've been asking the provincial government for a statement from public health about why we have been caught in this particular net. We have not received an answer, and it's frustrating for especially the small businesses among us who are clinging to life at this point, and are desperate for at least some sort of closure on the why. So,
well, it's interesting, Aaron. As you know, I'm out here in the West doing shows, and in Calgary, they have a set of rules. And that's, I guess, why I asked. So we did these shows at Festival Hall in Calgary, and some of the rules are difficult. And some of them are, by that I mean, in my opinion, they're illogical. They have a rule, for instance, that you're only allowed to sing for 30 minutes, and then you have to take a break for 10. The artist can stay on the stage and talk to the audience, or the band can play, but she can't sing. And then she can come back and sing for another 30 minutes. So they've changed the structure of our industry sets somewhat that nobody has an answer to, including public health. But what I'm finding interesting is that in Alberta and in Manitoba or in the East Coast, they have these rules that they're looking at, and they're seeing whether they can abide by them financially, if it makes sense for them. Their health inspectors are coming in. The Ironwood, for instance, in Calgary has been open, and he opened by having the health inspectors come in and say, yep, this abides by the rules. Am I incorrect? And I feel like that's not really but Ontario is not as untangled as that, to use your term. Is that a safe comment to make? That it's
yeah,
seems much more.
Being a bigger market, maybe. For those watching the news, you would have heard the strip clubs based out, I think it was like an Ottawa consortium of strip clubs got together, and they're calling the regulations unconstitutional, and they've hired lawyers and they're going to fight it. I mean, this is something that I'm sure a lot of sectors would like to do, but I don't know if that's the approach or not. It's, we want to collaborate with government. The WHO has, my understanding is, recently said that economic lockdowns are not the way to make, to recover from a pandemic. And so there's all kinds of, I don't believe that every ministry implicated, like every ministry with stakeholders, I don't believe was consulted when the modified stage 2 regulations came down. Like, we maybe need to believe that government has a full grasp on what it needs to be doing. It's simply not the case. And so when when regulations don't make sense, I think it's our responsibility as associations or stakeholders to go to government and say, okay, look, we know you're doing your best. You did this because of this, but this doesn't work. So here's what we think we can do where all of our common goals can be met. And of course, public health is everyone's number one priority. So that's the place we're at right now in Ontario, I think, in terms of helping them, but it's slow and access is hard. If I could say one more quick thing, I was on a call yesterday with some of the most senior leadership in the tourism and travel and hospitality sectors across Canada. Like, these are the owners of major companies and CEOs, all sort of wringing their hands. We're all in the same place. It is shockingly similar if you own a hotel versus a live music venue, what you're dealing with in terms of regulations and relief measures and your advocacy narrative. And I walked into that meeting thinking, okay, these are the big guys. They're going to have some answers. And it was a little scary, to be honest. So a lot of us are in the same place.
I mean, this is a little bit off topic, because just out of curiosity, was that Ontario or national? Because I'm finding that in other parts of the country that there's very little difference in the hotel sector. They don't have the people that, like, they don't have tourists, but they basically they found regulation. And that's, I guess, where I come back to, and maybe, you guys, the three of you, Tracy and Max and Jennifer, can talk a little bit about too, of on the regulation side. I've become a real advocate of, we need regulations, not shut down. And that if we figured out, and all of us have our whole careers dealt with keeping our audiences safe. And we've dealt with making sure our bands and our artists are safe and happy and comfortable. So it's just that we just need a new set of regulations in order to start down that path again. And now, of course, we're currently in Ontario in the lockdown that we're in. So yes, it's easy to say that, but I also believe we can't wait until we're out of a lockdown to start having the conversation. I mean, Tracy, would you agree with that? That if you had a clearer set of regulations, that you'd be able to make some better decisions on opening and how you might do that?
Yeah, I mean, the more information we know about what's likely to be expected of us, the better. I'm definitely that there's a group of Toronto venues working together, the Love You Live Association, and they've been really pushing to use this time when we are closed to make sure that when we are able to open again, that live music venues are treated in the same way as other places where people are gathering. I mean, right now, if we're running as a restaurant, at least this is my understanding, if we're running as a restaurant and that restaurant would be able to have 100 people in the room dining, if the restaurant were to contract an artist to perform, help me, Erin, if I get this wrong, if they were to bring in a band, that capacity would immediately be reduced to 50 people instead of the 100 people. And we haven't yet been considered for percentage capacity calculations like other industries that are comparable. So we're really hoping that we can work with government during this phase to try to together develop guidelines that make sense for our industry. Because if we're involved in that, in the development of the guidelines, it's just going to make it much more likely that the venue operators adhere to them. And I mean, in every case, the venues want to keep everybody as safe as possible. So we're just hoping that there can be greater dialogue during this time, so that when we're ready to go, we know exactly what we're able to do and don't have situations like we did a few weeks ago where, like, one afternoon we're told we can do live streaming, the next afternoon we can't, then it's reversed. And we totally understand why that happens. Everyone is struggling to figure out what's going on, but we need more. We need the conversation to keep going and to be involved in that conversation. And the Canadian Live Music Association and Love You Live have been doing great work to get those conversations going and keep them going. But it's not going to stop. It's a lot of work ahead still.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, obviously acknowledging that health is a provincial scenario, but that doesn't seem to be a crosstalk happening even in the pandemic, because there's some very fact-based things going on in BC and Alberta, fact-based, data-driven decisions. In Manitoba, if I have this right from my colleagues, because we're doing a show there on Friday, they were finding that some of the problem they were having with spreading had to do with alcohol consumption. And so they've allowed certain venues to stay open if they rescind their license to do that. So obviously that changes the experience. It changes the financial piece, but it does still allow them to do ticketed live shows. So it's like there's interesting things happening, but it's not happening consistently across the country. And I guess, Jennifer, I wanted to ask you, because of the CMAO piece and of the national conversation that I'm assuming must be a part of, are you finding that the festivals that you would talk to and relate to, are people in that kind of boat where they're all figuring out different things, or as an industry of festivals, are you kind of feeling like you're coming together?
The drive-in experience that we had, London made that quite easy for us to pull that one off, based on the other drive-in shows they've done. As far as the festival and what we're doing, there's not a lot of information yet, and I'm finding they're trying and they want to help, but they don't know. And a lot of the answers through public health and through anyone else I'm talking to is it's so uncertain, and they still don't have answers for us. They're throwing around some stuff like possible lower capacity, possible screening at the gate, possible proof of negative testing, but they really have nothing definite for us to plan by. I don't know if I answered your question there, but it's a little, I know they're working on it. It's something that they are talking about. We're just not seeing a lot to help us move forward. So we're trying to come up with plans ourselves and presenting them and seeing what they think and going from there. And I'm finding that's working a lot better. So in this area, say backstage, we can do this. Does this meet the guideline for that area? And by separating the different areas of what our festival is, we can get a plan for those sections a lot faster than as a whole. And I think that's been more successful for us to try and see what 2021 can be.
Right. So I think I was supposed to say at some point that if any of the people who are listening out there in listener land would like to ask a question, they're very welcome to put that either in the Q&A box, which I think is at the bottom, or in the chat if you want to, and everyone will see your question in chat. In the Q&A, only the panelists will see your question. So either way is fine if somebody has, I noticed here we're having a couple of comments come through. Max, and as far as you with the festival as well, are you having sort of broader conversations with your festival colleagues either in Ontario or any good coming of that, or is it a lot of the same?
Absolutely, especially the Ontario Folk Festival ADs communicate quite a bit, and we're having regular calls talking about what are you doing, how are you responding, what are you planning, what's your timeline. Like, just comparing notes has been invaluable, absolutely huge. And even on the administrator side, because I was both, like the EDs and stuff have also been in heavy communication, but we're also figuring it out for sure. I will say that two things. One is that a lot of us have been doing some of this work or a semblance of it on a micro level as we've tried to present things like our patio shows, things like our drive-in. We've had to develop pretty extensive plans in consultation with health units and law enforcement and all the rest of it. So there's some groundwork there within current restrictions. But yeah, I think a clearer framework is huge, not only to be able to operate in the face of restrictions, but also as best practice, as like this massive responsibility, like the idea of having a festival with an in-person element that is somewhat like, maybe smaller, but somewhat like the past festivals does intimidate me a bit. So that those guidelines and that knowledge and that conversation would be essential to making the best decisions in executing it.
So we've had someone ask us if there is a profit, if there's profit to be made from drive-in shows. And I wanted to extend that further in discussing in what the three of you do. And the way that you do that, are you making your profit before COVID? Were you making it from ticket sales? Or was it from other avenues? Because my experience in nonprofit has been that the ticket sales are just a small portion of what your revenue source is. And so some of these new models that might be coming up, if you remove ticket sales I guess what I'm asking is, Jennifer commented about sponsors also not being there. Are you finding that the model that you're able to create for a drive-in or any other show currently, that there's a profit picture in that, or is it just all right now for the sake of making sure artists are getting paid and that we're doing something?
For the CMAO show, we knew there was not going to be a profit there. Ticket sales could not pick up the cost of, just based on sheer capacity, the cost of bringing the artists in, hotels, logistics, staging. But we had to have a show within that year to maintain some of our funding and our sponsors. So when you look at it, we lost a lot less by having the show, if that helps.
Mm-hmm.
So our end balance looks a little bit better for the year than should we have just canceled it and tried streaming something. From the Jamboree perspective and talking to other companies that have done the drive-in shows, I've only, out of 10 that I've spoken to, had feedback of one actually making a little bit of money. A lot of them have lost quite a bit, and the experience is quite different too for the viewer. So I don't have, other than the CMAO's firsthand experience with the drive-ins, like maybe Max does a little bit more, but I'm not, when I run the model for us, it's not a profitable thing.
Mm-hmm. Max, was that your experience as well?
Yeah, in our, just to be very simplistic and transparent, basically ours was the same kind of thing. We were trying to preserve some of our funding, trying to keep money flowing to artists and keep live music happening in some form. So it was essentially covered 100% by grants, and we did make ticket sale revenue. So I guess that was profit in a sense. But in a more stringent times when perhaps having something on 100% funded might not be okay, or to a certain percentage, there's definitely huge challenges with making a drive-in profitable due to one of the main ones is you can't drink in your car, so you can't sell alcohol. That is huge. That's probably our second biggest revenue stream at the festival, other than earned revenue stream, other than ticket sales, I believe. So yeah, it's definitely limited. I'm thinking we may have a huge brainstorm around how to tweak it, but I think, if they were more profitable, you'd probably see a lot more of them happening. That's from my one experience of presenting one, but yeah.
Can we talk about the experience of being an audience at a drive-in show versus I don't know, I'm a board member of Blues Fest, as some of you would know, and I thought it was a really interesting experiment. It was really hard as an audience member to engage, and I know that everyone's trying hard. I'm just wondering if it's our only option, in the spring we can't do anything and we go back to drive-ins. I keep thinking about the way to enhance the drive-in experience. I think it's such a creative endeavor, and it would be so great if we could actually, I think every horn should have to be disabled before you pull into the lot, for starters. I don't know, Heather, did you attend the drive-ins in Ottawa? I think you did, but the horn honking got to me at a certain point. I don't know. It was hard. It was hard to know that that's where we were at. I just hope that if we have to stay there, I hope we can evolve it somehow. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I think, yes, obviously I was at those concerts since they were ours with Blues Fest.
I was going to let you say that.
But I don't know. I have tried to keep a really open mind to what this is going to be. The first time I walked into the fourth stage and there was plexiglass there, I thought, holy God, this is ugly. But it goes away when you're watching a show and you're actually seeing live music. It goes away for you and for the band, and it also made people feel safe. But it, like, on first pass, it was like, good Lord, dude, is this really what this has come to? And then on Friday night in Calgary, the same thing of like watching a whole band and a lead singer who has like a crystal clear, beautiful folk voice sing with a mask on, thinking like, how is this going to be? And it just sort of goes away because it's live music. At the end of the day, you're sitting listening, and I've actually found it really moving when I because how much I love live music. I found it a really moving experience to be in these rooms that we're doing these shows in with artists who, like Mariel on Friday, was the first time she played with the band since February. Like it was, and it sounded so good. It sounded way better than we can do in any other form. So it's kind of been adjusting my thinking of, like, I think there's a world that we might be going to festivals without alcohol. That allows us to stand closer to people, because I mean, I don't know, I just sort of like, it's a whole bunch of places that then I go, okay, then we have to restructure how festivals are funded, because somewhere in the 80s, we all started relying on alcohol money. Somewhere in the late 80s and the early 90s, we all started relying on sponsorships because the ticket sales couldn't support the artist fees. So it's, there's this whole, when you say we're all a part of the ecology, we've created an ecology that might have to dramatically change. And so some of the visual stuff, like, the horn honking thing for me was like going with you to a small club and you hate the guy that's whispering in the corner, and sometimes you're the only one who can hear that guy whispering.
Oh my God, it was nonstop. It was like,
I know, but it was just a very different thing, right? Like it was kind of like going to a larger club and it was just constant cheering. You couldn't hear the words that's what that horn was. It was, for me, it was just a different sound and a different experience. So, did I love it? No, but I loved seeing Hawaii Mighty perform, and I loved seeing Sam Roberts. Like, some of these bands where I was like, that was the trade-off, right? Was the honking horn. So
absolutely.
I think it's, the audience experience. I think the artist experience is actually possibly not going to be changed that much in the end of the day. Like, that's what we've been experiencing so far, is that they're playing live music with their bands on a safe, contained stage. I think that what might change is that, like, the bands that go out into the audience, that kind of interactive piece, that might be the short-term change. But it's the audience, I think, who's going to have the big experience difference. And at least that's what I've been seeing. So there is a question I know that I wanted to go back to Tracy, because you brought this up in the preamble, because I asked you also about your education programs and some of the things you're doing, and then you discussed with me some of the barriers you've been finding with insurance. So we have a question from someone about where we're thinking insurance is going. And Tracy, did you have sort of firsthand comment on that? I know Aaron has some policy and lobbying comment on that.
Yeah, well, Aaron will be able to bring us up to date on the small breakthrough that was, significant breakthrough that has been made. But I mean, a lot of venues were already having trouble finding insurance before COVID hit. We had colleagues who just were operating without insurance for their venues even before COVID. And then many venues since the pandemic just haven't been able to find anything either affordable or any insurance at all. Lula was in a bad situation with regards to insurance for a while. We looked for months before we found something. And even now, it's not really a policy that allows us to do what we were doing before. So we're going to have to find some other solutions. A lot of lobbying has been done to try to get some help from the Ontario government to find some new solutions for insurance. And maybe you can jump in here, Aaron, and fill us in on the...
Yeah, sure. The situation is the underwriters have bailed, the primary underwriters have bailed from the market, and no one wants to underwrite live music because of what we're hearing is liquor. So talk about reimagining live music and liquor. I mean, I think the conversation could go on and on about, how that works, does it work, what replaces it, etc. But for another day, perhaps there are immediate challenges, trying not to let the insurance crisis be the death knell of the live music industry in this country in the face of a pandemic. Just when we think it's a pandemic, now all of a sudden it's insurance. So, and the insurance industry claiming that it has nothing to do with the pandemic, that it's something called a hard market, and they were pulling out anyway, out of hospitality and tourism broadly, not just live music. So to Tracy's point, the Insurance Bureau of Canada released a press release this morning saying they're committed to helping a small business in the hospitality sector, which includes us, find a pathway forward. So meaning we don't like the bad publicity the insurance industry is getting, so we're going to see if we can find some underwriters for you. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's a dog's breakfast. But that is a good step because it's the insurance industry taking some responsibility. It's really been about the advocacy that the CLMA and others have been doing behind the scenes, including the Lovely Live group, to prod and poke the insurance industry to get a grip. We had a meeting with the finance minister in the province. Shortly after that, there was a new program supporting the Safe Reopening Act that we believe will be approved, and it includes something around immunity where liability is concerned. And again, perhaps a longer conversation we have time for today, but all of these inching us towards a reckoning with the insurance industry, for whom many premiums have been doubling, if not quadrupling over the years. It's not a new problem, but it certainly is a huge problem today.
Mm-hmm. And Jennifer, Max, are you in the same position with festivals?
For years, and they're on board, but they will want a few lenience, like things in there for waivers and things on responsibility around COVID. So we're working with them, they're working with us, and they're very good. But I know most people in the industry don't have that same response from their insurance companies. We're very lucky to have this relationship with ours.
We're pretty lucky. I rushed our renewal maybe before they realized what they should be doing. I don't know, but it only, like, we only saw a small increase, so that was great. I'm worried more about maybe their next renewal. Yeah, I kind of feel like maybe we'd beat them to the punch. I'm not sure.
Slightly different for festivals. I'm finding there's a difference between outdoor events and liquor-based bars or restaurants, and part of our challenge very quickly is that we're being lumped in with nightclubs. Yeah, thanks. Exactly. And nightclubs have I can't give you percentages, but may have a higher claims more often, and certainly part of the problem. But we're trying to be seen as a distinct group, a subset of this sort of stakeholder group, and that's part of our conversation with both government and the insurance sector.
Okay, and we have a question I'm going to just go back to. We touched on a little bit of, do people feel that agents and or artists would be willing to be a part of the solution and accept lower fees in the long run? Well, how have your conversations gone?
In general, I would say yes. Everything, I think, in general, agents, artists understand the ecosystem. They understand that there's no festivals, there's nowhere to play, or whatever it may be. So yeah, I mean, in general, those conversations, everyone is aware of the situation we're in and all the challenges being faced. But yeah, that's like a jumping off.
And so much of what festivals and Tracy, when you and I have worked together, artists have relied on also is touring grants in this country. Now, of course, we're not talking about international, but Canadian artists have relied on touring grants and that sort of thing. Has anyone received any indication of that sort of level of support? Is it something that we think we can keep relying on, say during the summer festival season, or is it something that we expect to change?
Do you mean access to grants like Canada Council touring grants for domestic artists?
Well, I mean, I know that, for instance, that the festivals don't directly access those, but artists have. So when Tracy and I have worked together and done say an artist from Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, they might access some small travel and touring. Have you heard anything about whether artists can expect that that is going to continue, or is it going to change? Which then, of course, would affect venues and or festivals on some of that costing and the ecology.
Pure speculation on my part. No, I have not heard, but I can't imagine there will be touring grants if there's no touring. However, I can imagine various funding agencies repurposing some of that money in the short term, and certainly increasing that support when touring is more realistic.
So your indication so far has been that government, whether it's provincial or federal, um, will continue to be at least at the same level in its support going forward. That's what you've indicated, or that
Well,
you've heard.
you know, I haven't heard anything, but that's just based on like my general sense. But there is a conversation to be had around how artists are being served during this pandemic from a funding perspective, or from emergency relief perspective. And we probably don't have time to go there either right now. But you know, we need to make sure there are artists at the end of this, not just venues. And it's been a long wait for a government to step forward with an artist-specific relief program that many of us have been calling for. Haven't seen it yet.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if there's been similar studies that's gone on in the UK talking about, they think there'll only be about a 30% loss in the UK. We haven't had a study like that happen at this point, have we?
So there have been a couple of comprehensive surveys that led by Miranda Mulholland and Music Canada, and not for a couple of weeks now. The most recent one revealed just, you know, with the true impact and the reliance on CERB, and of course the argument for the extension or the exemption, pardon me, of royalties up to $1,000 for CERB, and then of course the reimagination of the CRB, now like the renamed EI program. Making sure that it's accessible by artists. But yeah, that's all I know. I mean, it's really interesting how, yeah, I guess I already said it. I mean, how the governments are very preoccupied with the future for artists and wanting to make sure that they're here. But it's perhaps it's because we don't have a national association that's artist facing. And that the labels and the music industry associations provincially do a lot of that legwork. Even the Canadian Live Music Association doesn't represent artists directly, so I'm not sure where that's going to land. But I would agree with your assessment in terms of the decrease in working artists that we'll see. I mean, that's already happening for sure, and will continue to accelerate.
So we just have a couple minutes left. So I want to give the panel an opportunity to have like a last word, a last comment. So I'm going to go around again and start with Tracy. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to comment on?
Well, just following up on Aaron's comments about artists, I am really concerned about seeing a drop off in artists, especially session musicians and the musicians that aren't necessarily in the forefront in accessing grants themselves. I'm worried that when we are ready to come back, those artists will have had, won't have been able to continue to pursue their art during this time. So direct support for artists of all kinds, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jennifer, anything that you'd like to finish off with?
Yeah, I mean, I really think from this, I'd love to see us maybe group together and pull together a committee that further talks about this. There's so many areas going through the winter months. How can we be creative to still pull live music out there when you can't do drive-in shows? Things are changing so drastically daily with the counts rising, and the winter months are going to get pretty hard for not just the artists, but the crews, the setups, the staging, backline people that can't afford rent. There's so many different things that we weren't able to touch. But that, I can go on forever on that. But I want to thank you for having me here. But I do want to touch back to the drive-in experience just quickly. I actually got in a golf cart and sat out in the front for our awards show, and the tooting of the horns was showing excitement for our perspective, and the artists on the stage loved it. They said it was like the applaud. They felt that feeling of a presence of an audience. So maybe it was different with the awards show, but we had a very successful, very interactive audience from their cars out their windows. Maybe we can relook at that coming into the spring and find a way to make them profitable. There has to be something we can collectively pull together and do. So thank you again for having me, and this has been great.
All right, thank you. Max, anything you want to add?
Nothing too profound. I just would add that although we have limited time and resources, FMO does have an advocacy committee where we do talk about things like this often, and we pick a few to focus on. I'm still on that committee, but I used to be the chair. But if you're interested in getting involved in that or just knowing what we're talking about there, you can reach out to myself or the current chair.
Thank you. And Erin, anything final words for you?
Oh, no, I have nothing more to say.
Excellent.
I would just like to say, I would like to apologize for my remarks about drive-ins. I found the horns just a little bit discombobulating, but I absolutely salute and applaud every single company and organization that put them on, because at the end of the day, you're absolutely right, both Jennifer and Heather. It was a way to connect fans and artists, and it was very special. And there were lots of moments in that night that moved me to tears. So I regret, I could have put it another way. I want to say a couple of things very quickly. There are a lot of silver linings in this. There really are. We're going to survive. We may not look the same, but we'll come out of this somehow. And the work that each and every one of you are doing, and I've scrolled through the names and I see a lot of old friends and familiar faces in the participant list. And I say hello and thank you for everything that you're doing and contributing. A lot of us are very tired, and it's hard to keep getting out of bed every day to face the same thing over and over again, but we do it because we love the music that you make, and we're not going to stop until we're able to enjoy it in person again. So there's a lot of heavy lifting still to go, but I'm pleased to be part of this conversation and all of the conversations I've got to join over the last 7 months. And I thank each and every one of you for your contributions, because it's going to take all of us to get us through.
Great, thank you. So we're going to wrap up because we're 3 minutes past what we said we would take of people's time. So thank you so much for being a part of this and this digital form of FMO, and hopefully we will all see each other again soon, and the FMO conference will come back and we'll enjoy that again next year. So have a great weekend, and thank you very much.